So it is a correct timing to have this, and I must compliment MeitY, who has been quite open-minded, because the first drafts which came out in public domain, they had a lot of concerns of all the stakeholders. And instead of pushing that, the MeitY did come forward to have consultations, to amend it, to incorporate few, and a much revised, nuanced draft has come out. Still, there are some pain points, and that pain points are being addressed through various conferences. So I must compliment to that extent to the government thought process, because what is happening in this particular act or the requirement is the technology is moving at breakneck speed, and the things required and the use cases which are happening out of it are completely transformed and in a very different way that we are supposed to handle it. And whether the regulator's role has to be into minuteness or it has to be at a very high level. So for that, I have got the best of the panelists who are neck deep into the sector, who understand the nuances, who are with us. So what I suggest is I'll make some opening remarks for a couple, 2-3 minutes, and then request each one of you, and at that time I'll introduce you when I request you to speak off, maybe 5 minutes, so that we have an hour with us and we can have some time for the questions. So that is how I plan to go about it. Now, if you hear what Rahul has said, is you have to introspect into the existing one and look at the way forward and how government has planned to commit. You have come up already with 3 pillars which they plan to bring under this Digital India Act. One is on the protection of personal data. I think it's a very happy moment that the amendment has come, because previously they had put non-personal data also there. Also the bugs which may be there in the hardware, all that has gone. So now it is absolutely as per the Puttaswamy judgment on personal data. So that is one wing. Second will be, of course, the rules that will emerge to control this entire system. And that is going to go a long way when we are working. And then, of course, the governance policy for the data. Another good thing which has happened is now it is settled that MeitY is going to be at the driver's seat, where in the interministerial thing, the INB ministry, the home ministry, all will be the participants to express their concerns, which will be addressed through the act of the MeitY. So that is another good development which has happened, where we used to have number of things coming from various sectors and adding to the confusions and concerns when we were going ahead. And the third part of it is also thought of amending the IPC if need be, which has come up in the use cases where, especially on the gaming thing, where we are distinguishing between skill and game of chance. And the courts calling the racing as a game of skill, and whether it comes under wagering and betting or it does not come under wagering and betting. These nuances needs to be settled when we are moving ahead with it. So that will require some amendment in the IPC Act, because IPC is governed by the state governments. And this act, when it finally will come, it will be the central government. So all the stakeholders will have one convincing door to knock at. And they need not spread across the states and every state government independently going for it. So that's a third big change that has come up. So I think it's moving in the right direction. But I will request my panelists to bring out the various nuances. So first of all, I'll request my colleague, Mr. J. Satyanarayana. Of course, he has been secretary. He has been with UIDAI. That is the Aadhaar, popularly known as the product is Aadhaar. That is how it is. And of course, he has also been instrumental in digitizing the MI systems of the government and then linking it with the fintech and the financial exchanges and the financial trades quite a lot. So he has that. And using that as a platform, he has now an expertise in the health sector. One of the major use cases which will be emerging, where your personal health data will be completely digitized and available in the domain, public domain or restricted domain, to be accessed by the doctors concerned with your permission or not with your permission, or to the bill settlers of the government who will have an open access to everything. There are lots of nuances into it. So over to you, and my request to you is that, of course, you will delve upon the journey, but also I will request you to put forward as to how you visualize the whole Digital India Act to emerge, to what detailing it should go, or whether it should be broad-based. Over to you.
Thank you, Aruna ji, and my fellow panelists, with whom all of them incidentally, I had the pleasure of working with in different contexts. Absolutely, we are at at crossroads, so to say, with on the legislative front, with the legislation on personal data getting deliberated, and so that it is the best that is possible. And also on the anvil is the overhauling of the IT Act itself. Personally, I have been probably dealing with IT in some manner or the other. Even the pre-IT Act 2000 days, so my journey started even when there was no act, and continued through, from, as I can call it, no G to 5G. Okay. And PC to QC, meaning PC days we were doing small programming, to QC where we are talking of quantum computing. So it's a thing. And then I would like to touch upon two aspects. The first one is, of course, about my own journey and the future. My past and future I will talk through a small presentation towards the end, as per the scheme of this session. But right now, what I would like to mention is the importance of frameworks. Okay, you have a very good act, everything, but to realize the vision and intention of that act, we need to have frameworks. So, coming to specifically to e-governance, we have benefited a lot in the past 3 decades due to the emergence of frameworks. I would mention, for instance, the framework of India Stack, which has done significant public good in this country and has become an example for other countries. We also have had, the experience of, for instance, a framework for the digital health, which Aruna ji has mentioned, and which I had the fortune of chairing the expert committee 5 years ago. Now it's a reality. The ABHA numbers and going into hundreds of millions of, and also the records, personal records getting generated on a voluntary basis by the citizens. So it's all, because the framework was so robust and, far-sighted, all this became quite easily. Another example I would give, which is the GSTN. The taxation systems were so crisscrossing across the whole, and for a consignment to travel from one state to another state, it was such a tedious thing. I was myself Special Commissioner of Commercial Tax ages ago. I remember how the interstate consignments are handled. So today it's all, though it's a state subject, because the nice framework they have, it has materialized. Some more things which are in the offing are the NDR, National Digital Education Architecture Framework, is one more, both for school education and also for the higher education. And one AgriStack, which is the framework for the digital agriculture, which is also shaping pretty well. In short, the need for frameworks is very much important. So the MeitY was also interested in seeing that how do you create a framework of frameworks to enable the ministries to create their own frameworks. What is that meta framework that is required? So it's called India 2.0, India Digital Enterprise, Digital Ecosystem Architecture. India 2.0. If you can Google, you will find it easily. So it's a meta framework that enables either a ministry or a state government or even a private organization to create their own digital frameworks. The second short point I would like to make is on the need for institutional frameworks as well, institutional structures which are required. We have seen projects which have dragged on for ages and did not help a single citizen. We have seen projects which have really impacted hundreds of millions of people in this country. So one common thread across these success stories is there has been a dedicated institution which has been started or established as a first step. I will say that Aadhaar, for instance, UIDI, Unique Identity Authority of India, was established then it got all the focus that is required, and then the GST. You have seen the entire transformation of the taxation. NPCI was started years ago, and now we are reaping the benefits of UPI in this country. And latest in the thing is the NHA, which was started in 2018 or around that time, and now it is going big on the digital health, ABDM, and so on. So the need for a dedicated institution, I'm not saying that it should be a very large and expansive institution with all wings. Even if it is small, depending on the need, a dedicated effort is required. If you have to realize any big achievements in this country. So these 2 points occur to me at this point. One is the overall frameworks and a dedicated institution. When we are going forward into a new act also, the act provides for these things. I think it will be much. Whatever I have mentioned, they are all through executive orders. But if there is a overarching provision that enables, it gives them some strength to operate more confidently in this country, that will be really, these 2 essential elements could be provided in the upcoming act. So I pause here. Thank you.
Slides you want to show now?
No, at the end.
At the end, you will show. Okay, well, perfect.
One more, after one round.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Satyanarayana. You have brought in one very important use case of e-governance, and people belittle it. You don't appreciate that how the entire government sector has changed into e-governance model. DBT, when we were struggling in 2012 to match all the ITs of all the financial sectors, I literally locked them in the room for 3 days, along with MIS and PFMS. And at the end of the story, then they agreed that each one of have to do the corrections and bring in. The important thing about the e-governance model is the states learned with each other. And therefore, the replicability was very fast. And in 5-6 months, the DBT was there all over the country. Now, today we have reached a stage, not a single pie of any central government or state government is a cash transaction. It's all cashless, 100% cashless, no mean achievement. Similarly, the databases, household databases. And what he said, that enabled to bring in these use cases for all entitlement, the shift from welfare to entitlement. So in the act, provisioning for e-governance is important, because what happens, e-governance is something happening internally even to MeitY for that matter. And it is not getting reflected. So I am very thankful you flagged this point very well. Now, of course,
Arunaji, one little snippet I would like to give. Any such institutional framework, again, should not be centralized. My experience over the decades has been that wherever the centralized effort was attempted as a monolithic institution at center, sitting in Delhi or somewhere, trying to oversee the entire e-governance of all ministries, it will never fail. Whatever examples I gave earlier succeeded because they were rooted in that particular ministry which was responsible for delivering goods there. So centralization of the institution is pretty risky thing.
Well flagged. So, of course, now I request Dr. Gulshan Rai, who is been working in certain which is the first detection point for any cybersecurity attack. And efficiently, he constituted that framework. He has been coordinator for cybersecurity at the highest level, advisory role. He has been participant into that. And of course, now he is in a private sector with Dua Associates. I will request him that besides the concerns on cybersecurity, we had attacks on the power distribution network besides the banks, and smaller attacks keeps on happening. Corrections have taken place. So here the issue comes as one, detection of attack, two, our response time to correct that attack, and three, what preventive steps we take on the attack. And then I will also request you to touch upon the fake information detection, because that has also now become a very big issue about the fake information which keeps on floating. So how quickly we are able to detect it and move ahead with it, because that is becoming a concern in the cybersecurity point of view also, as well as the flow and multiplication is so fast that it creates a concern when we are heading it. So over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Satyanarayana, former Secretary, Government of India. Madam Aruna Sharma, former Secretary, Government of India. My colleague, Professor Charu Malhotra, Gokul Sharma ji, Ashish Agrawal, Rakesh Maheshwari, General Sahani, and friends, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I am grateful to the organizers for inviting me and giving me opportunity. Many of you would be knowing it, perhaps the moderator has not touched that point, that the Information Technology Act was written by me. That was drafted by me. And I can tell you, we went with a very clear objective. And it was, the origination point was the 8th five-year plan. We were writing that plan, and that's the time we thought that when the bandwidths are increasing, we want to lay down a backbone. And what is the proof, legal evidence of a electronic document? That was the point with which we started writing the act. And I've gone through journey. I can tell you my experience. I used to go to the Ministry of Law. They say, what is the need of this act? Wherever highest forum we go, what is the need of this act? And that is the day, and that we see today. What is the difference? How the things have moved on. A lot of things have changed there. We brought out the act in 2000. Then we brought amendment. We took almost 2 years to bring amendment in 2008. And I think Mr. Satyanarayana knows very well, and Madam Aruna Sharma ji also knows very well. I was one of them who was under the fire from both the governments there. That this blocking exercise, that she said, the fake news aspect, that. And I was about to be suspended there. That was the situation that time. And I passed through that situation. Then I asked the people on the day, the 200 all apps were banned, Chinese app. And the Honorable Minister, President Minister was on the dais, and other member of parliament were on the dais. I also was on the dais there. But both of you were trying to, they were from both the government, they were trying to suspend me. Today you have the same provision to block these 227 apps there. Mr. President Trump could not succeed in blocking the TikTok there. I passed through those circumstances there. We did modify. And I think Bahul will bear with me. When we wrote the rules of the Section 69 blocking, we spent days together to write it, and we wrote word by ourselves. And he will tell you the kind of a thing. But the point is that we went with a clear assumption that we have to give a legal evidentiary value to the electronic document. And we brought the concept of digital signature. And then, as a part of that, e-governance was flourishing that time, and we brought e-governance, and of course, associated with that, crimes also came. That's where the Information Technology Act came. Basically, that came. Now, if you see today, the situation is much more different. I have seen the basic paper of Digital India Act, and I have seen the Data Protection Act, and I will give my views, is saying slightly contrary. The present draft, which was put up, which was till the 2nd or 3rd January, which was there. That draft, you can convert, you can take in non-personal data also into account. Because the way the personal data is defined, it includes a non-personal data also there. And today, the non-personal data is much more important than the personal data. Personal data is flowing, there is hardly anything issues there, because the personal data always is flowing on the network there. It's always flowing on the network. One cannot prove where the data is leaked out, who's data collecting there. It's going on internal. How many of you know that Google has implemented a RCS kind of a protocol, communication protocol? Every call is authenticated by them, whether it's a voice call or digital call. The example, I mean, their arguments are very clear, and they are very valid arguments are there. That now today we are in a digital kind of a voice call, communication call. Everything is digital there. When you enter in my Google product, when you enter in somewhere else, I don't know. I have to authenticate to you. At one time, the call used to go to America and then come back here. Today, all the service providers have installed these servers and they authenticate over here. So in this scenario, I get sometime bogged up. I mean, I was part of the committee, Justice B.N. Krishna committee. We drafted the personal law, but that was very elaborate law. I did oppose. And we tried to bring down, liberalize the localization of the data. If the data is moving on internet, how can you localize the data? I don't understand there. And where is how would you put it there? I think I appreciate what Mr. Satyanarayana has said. We need to be very, very clear what framework we need to have to draft a law. See, today if you ask me to implement, I will rewrite the entire Information Technology Act and break into a number of parts there. IPC is coordinated by the Ministry of Law. You have a Consumer Act also, which is coordinated by Ministry of Consumer. They went and defined the platform. Now, National Stock Exchange is a platform. You do the trading, railway is a platform. You do any banking transformation in transaction, there is a platform. How do we define it? Digital market there. So to me it appears, I really don't know, I have not seen what exactly is the clear objective which they want to achieve through Digital India Act. But do we need that kind of encompassing act there? But one thing is very clear to my mind, we need a act to replace Information Technology Act, because the technology has gone away. I'll give you, today the world economy is around $100 trillion. That's a world economy. 40% of that economy is a digital economy there. If you look at India, we have crossed $3 trillion kind of a technology. And we are expecting to be a $5 trillion technology by 2025 or 2026, whatever may be there. We have achieved 20% of the digital economy. So if you look at every trade, is all becoming a cross-border trade. We cannot avoid a cross-border kind of a transactions in a digital economy. And when you do the cross-border economy, you don't know what kind of a technology is implemented on this side, what we are implementing on our side there, what kind of a hardware platform, blockchain we talk about, AI talk about it. And I was reading the AI report come out with the MeitY yesterday night. It's mind-boggling kind of a things there. So I don't know. I mean, I have not seen Digital India Act. We'll have to cover all those issues there. Now IT Act 2000, today is 2023. It has lived for 2023, maybe live another couple of years for the purpose for which was created there. But today, if we are moving on a $45 trillion, the digital economy today, and we'll be moving $60 trillion in a couple of years' time there, we need to address the framework to suit that kind of a digital economy. And that is in my view, a gigantic task there. And I certainly, again I say, agree with Mr. Satyanarayana, that we need to have a framework, clarity what exactly we want to do that. We were very clear we had to address the digital legal evidentiary value of the document. That's what we did and put the crimes accordingly there. One act will be suitable for all the issues which we are talking about it, or we need a number of acts there which are consistent and interoperable with each other. What do we need it? I think that debate and that kind of exercise has not gone through that. If you look at the first version of the Data Protection Act 2000 Bill 2018, and if you see whatever they brought in 21, huge difference, dilution there. those dilution there. There is everything going by rules, regulation there. I think that kind of a swing it's not desirable. It will be dangerous. The kind of economy we are moving in today, we can't limit the economy. We can't talk about localization. We need to evolve. Apart from that one, I said our framework should be compatible to what is happening international also there. We cannot design our own framework and then we keep on trying to negotiate, because we are all bound by the trade agreement, we are bound by the things there. Issue of fake news is becoming very, very difficult there with the generative kind of AI which has come up there. See, AI has a useful effect and AI has a harmful effect there. Useful impact require a sophisticated AI algorithm and testing models there. Where harmful AI, you don't require those kind of a sophisticated AI algorithms there. I mean, we have seen in the past, we have seen recently also how AI generative kind of a situation is coming up there. So we need to address these issues there. Whether we one framework or number of framework, that's what we need to do. But we need to address these kind of challenges which we are going to have it there. There has to be one master, one control. Where I agree, Madam Sharma, the moderator, that it's good that the government has decided everything will go with MeitY. They may give the entire implementation of fake news is now gone to Minister of Information Broadcasting, or somewhere else will go there. But there will be only one authority which may give in the business allocation. They can amend and they can do that. But we need to be very, very clear to how to do that. Let us remember very clearly, we are in a deep virtual world, meta world, which Mr. Satyanarayana used a word. But we need to interpret this deep virtual meta world into real aspect there. When we deal with this thing, legal issue, after all we are talking about the legal law, we need to deal in the real world. How do we explain those real words there? I have gone through when this Supreme Court was examining the entire IT Act, they entirely vetted subsequently the things there. How much difficulty I had to explain to the Supreme Court. Just see, every day for 2 hours I used to be there. They put me in the front and say, sit down with the SG and explain to us. So I think we need to convert this virtual world in the real world. And this real world is becoming very, very difficult. We have talked about the TOR, security. She talked about the security there. We extended in the original 2000, there was hardly any clause of the security. We brought it in 2008 amendment, the security part of it. But today security itself is becoming a different, altogether big domain there. You don't know when the AI is your friend, and when you don't know when AI is become your animosity and start working against you. So in the case, you talk about ChatGPT there. Look at the ChatGPT 4. What is the data size there? 171, 200 billion, that kind of a size is there. And they're talking about the next version, we're talking about 1 trillion kind of data record. They're talking about the AI. That scenario is changing that. And the security, the ChatGPT, you can get how to hack an email, how to prevent an email. How do you handle? The security is becoming very, very difficult in the heterogeneous world, particularly in the AI or NLP world. I think we need to debate in a wider manner, in detailed manner. No country has done. They are bringing out a segregated kind of a framework. In my view, that is the only solution, that we touch one problem, one issue, bring out a framework or the act there, touch another problem and bring out the act there. But they should be interoperable, consistent, as well as in line with what internationally is available. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just one thing is there. What is being envisaged in Digital India Act is an umbrella act. So that when you have the specific acts, like there is a e-gaming, they have come up with a draft. Similarly, they have come up with a privacy bill. So it should not contradict with each other. And that is becoming a major concern today when contradictions come, like he did make a mention. So he did point out very clearly to have an umbrella act, and that role and that provisioning has to come in the Digital India Act, so that everything is congruent to that thought process that we allow innovation, we allow less of regulation, but we also ensure that the users are well informed when they are using that particular technology and they are protected. These are the broad frameworks which are emerging from the thought process of Digital India Act, and that has to come up so that every other thing gets synced into it. And there are too many players into it. Like before I request Mr. Vakul Sharma, I'll just touch one example, because when we are talking about interoperability of various provisioning and the legal provisioning and in sync with the Act, recently we had this issue of Competition Commission coming up with this fallback liabilities on the platforms. Now that is a very big issue. Is the shop responsible if this water product is bad, or it's the water supplier who is responsible? The platform is like a shop where they have to have a provision that I can file a complaint, I can get the redressal, and I go ahead with it. But that is not what it is talking about. It is shifting the onus on the messenger, the platform. So these kind of legal things, when they start coming up, it requires a lot of efforts to get it cleaned, and therefore you need this umbrella kind of a thing so that these things are curtailed right at the initial stages. Similarly, we are what you expressed about the Consumer Affairs Department, the Home Department, that is the IPC, which will come, Ministry of Law will come. And of course, the IT various users departments when you are coming. In fact, I think there was on this fantasy sports, whether it should rest with the Sports and Youth Welfare Department. Now, fantasy sports is an e-platform. The game rules, sports department can do. But when the moment you shift here, how does it fit in? So with that background, I request Mr. Vakul Sharma as to the legal enactments, their horizontal linkages, and matching vertically into the thought process of not over-regulation, but a watchdog kind of a treatment, and how we go ahead with it. Over to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's my great honor to be here. And in fact, all the panel members have been my mentors for many, many years. So whatever I have learned on standing on their broad shoulders. And in fact, when I'm looking into the IT Act as a kind of a template, then the IT Act has grown in the past 23 years. When IT Act came in 2000, I will say that it was at that point of time a kind of a plain vanilla act. It talked about from a point of view of electronic governance, role of controller of certifying authorities, cyber crimes, and it also talked from a point of view of certain issues like intermediaries. But it was in a kind of a straitjacket in a different set of chapters. Those were early days. I think the beauty of IT Act was that after 1885, India had one legislation which was technology based. In 1885, we had a Indian Telegraph Act. So for over 115 years, there was no technology related enactment in India. Consider also the fact that in 1956, computers were introduced in India. Till 1956, till the year 2000, there was no legal definition of data, computer systems, or internet. Considering also the fact that India at the year 2000 was considered as a backyard of call centers. But there were no legal definitions available to us. So that kind of a gap was filled. Then we were looking into a kind of a version 2.0. That was the introduction of amendments in the IT Act. Now, if I am looking into the amendments of the IT Act, then we are looking into the huge range from cybersecurity, giving statutory rights and obligations to computer emergency response team, and also looking into the definition of intermediaries. And let us say from that point of view, putting across certain important rules like intermediary guidelines, also looking from the point of view of blocking rules, also looking from the point of view of surveillance and interception. When in 2021, certain apps were blocked, those rules made in 2009 were being used. So this is a kind of a sweep that you can look from a point of view. Now, if I see on the hindsight, had 69 and 69A rules were not there, we would have no legal means to block any of the apps. TikTok has been banned subsequent to our action in presently in 23 jurisdictions. So this is a kind of, let us say, happenings that were taking place. Then there was a version 3, and I say a version 3 was Shreya Singhal case. Shreya Singhal case pointed out one simple fact, that there could be a chilling effect. There could be a danger to freedom of expression and freedom of expression and speech. Court from the first time looked from the point of view of angle of Article 19(1)(a) and looked into the provisions of Section 66A from that point. Now, if I see Shreya Singhal, the judgment came in 2015, 24th of March. If I look back, then I will say Shreya Singhal from that point of time and as of today was a very important judgment. Not from the point of view of Section 66A or let us say from a point of view of chilling effect, but by restoring digital human rights. I feel that this judgment should be seen and read and reread by looking into the digital human rights. And that was a kind of a beginning of a digital human rights recognition in India. One of the important features of this entire journey was how the electronic governance was made applicable across India. JS sir has been, let us say, in the forefront in looking into these aspects. I will just point out to you Section 6A of the IT Act was introduced from the point of view how electronic governance can be used and services can be provided by the private players. MCA 21 was the example. So the question was how MCA 21 could charge fees. So then Section 6A came into picture. So these, I should say, were the kind of, let us say, the kind of a roller coaster ride of the development of the Act. And then if I'm looking from this particular aspect, then we had a version 4.0 when digital media intermediary rules came into force. Now, if I look into the digital media rules, it is a kind of a departure from our basic plain vanilla definition of intermediaries. Now we are covering the entire social media and the social media ecosystem, including the significant social media also. So this is a kind of a journey. So this journey is a kind of, I should say, a kind of an edifice on which the Digital India Act framework would happen. The question is, what kind of a framework that we would like to have? Should we have the similar kind of nuances in a form of a chapterization like we had in IT Act? Or as Dr. Gulshan Rai has flagged, that there has to be a kind of a segregation. Now, if I am looking into a kind of a segregation, I have to ask myself one thing. Are we ready? Are we ready for such kind of a implementation? I will just give you one interesting point here. National Crime Records Bureau in their 2021 report, has mentioned that in India, there has not been a single case related to plea bargaining that has been filed from the point of view of cyber crime cases in India. Plea bargain comes into section 265B of the Criminal Procedure Code. And if I look into the entire adjudication process also, the entire adjudication process, there was a case that came before the adjudicating officer in 2008. It was decided in 2010. And now it has been finally decided by the Madras High Court in 2022. Look at the journey. The point is, you can have the best of the acts, the best of the legislation, whether in a segregation form or in a different form. But when it comes to the adjudication process, like we have a section 43, 43A, and then we have section 66, and then section 66, capital B, C, D, and E, and F. And here I would wish to also point out one fact. The sterling departure in the IT Act 2009 amendments were introduction of regulating child pornography. That was section 67B, and it was far ahead of our current POCSO Act. The provisions of section 65B were used and reintroduced in a different form in the POCSO Act. So from that point, the IT Act has been a front runner, and it influenced many other legislations also. The Consumer Protection Act, from that point of view, has taken a lot of important points from the IT Act. And if I look into a Metrology Act of India, which is a very basic act, then it also borrowed some of its rules from the Information Technology Act and its practices. So the question is, and the very simple question I'm asking is, yes, we can have the best of the legislation. We could have the best of the subordinate legislation practices. But where is the implementation? If it is going to take me 20 years, 25 years to get a case decided, then what is the use of it? And in this context, I would like to just put across to you that the recent introduction of Grievance Appellate Committee, where even the appeal is being decided online within 30 days. These are some of the models that can be implemented. So this is how I think the entire body works. Not having a legislation, yes, that is important. And I will just put across to another main point. If I am looking into a chat GPT, as Dr. Gulshan has talked about it, I am looking from a point of view of a perfect cybercrime using chat GPT. There have been instances where people are filing cases on the companies providing artificial intelligence support system. Someone has mimicked voices and looked into an extortion. So all these things are going to happen. But do we have this kind of a wherewithal with us available at this point of time? Think from a point of view of a common man. I'm talking about 142 crores of Indians. We have to provide them some kind of an adjudication process, an efficient adjudication process. Yes, we are looking from a point of view of a open, safe, trust, and accountable internet. But these things should come to each one of us. Each one of us with a, let us say, in a faster mode. I should not wait years after years. So our online dispute resolution mechanism or online processes or online dispute resolution of cases would be a welcome change when we are going to look into these aspects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You have brought in these nuances so beautifully and so correctly. And here I'll just like to make a mention, just to add on to what you said, that what is happening. Let me give you an example of the e-gaming draft which has come out. SRO is getting confused with the appellate body.
Yes.
If they have seen, what does SRO mean? Self-regulation body. Self means I have to be in that business. I cannot be a school teacher, I cannot be a watchdog, I can't be a parent, I can't be a professor. The way they have defined what the SRO will be. So that needs a major correction. There has to be an appellate body, which EdTech has brought in. EdTech has brought in a grievance redressal appellate body. So there is an SRO, so there are 3 levels for grievance redressal. One is by the firm themselves, then of course their peer group review SRO, and then of course this appellate body. So that is the kind where we can get a quick grievance redressals when we are talking about the e-related grievances of the user, which are very, very important. And you have brought in a very beautiful angle of human rights, because today, especially in the broadcasting sector, the issue is coming of the privacy. Issue is coming of the freedom of speech. The issue is coming that personal security. So Puttaswamy judgment and Shreya Singh's judgment, these are the 2 major landmarks which has to be kept in view when we are drafting these acts or when we are fine-tuning these acts. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, just
please.
would like to add.
Yeah.
If we are looking from a point of view of Digital India Act and its implementation, we have to also look from a point of view the kind of IT infrastructure available to the law enforcement agencies, to our courts. I will just give you one example. Look at the state of affairs of our malkhanas, where the electronic seized material is being kept. India is a country, heat, dust, humidity. Electronic evidence will not survive. It will never survive. As a defense counsel, I can say, after 10, 15 years, when the matter will be on the trial, nothing will work. Whatever that has been seized, it will not work. And this is what I have seen, let us say, personally in hundreds of cases. So we have to look from a point of view of putting some emphasis on this kind of IT infrastructure issues as well. Thanks very much.
With taking cue from the Bakul's intervention, I move to Mr. Akash Agarwal, right, who is head of the public policy in NASSCOM. And of course, what I will like him to focus upon, that in G20, the virtual digital asset we are bringing center stage for discussions, right? So it's taking ahead with a commonality of understanding of the legal structures across the globe on some of the digital products, right? Similarly, we are having an issue of, banning the internet, which has happened so often, especially in 2 states of the country. And today, when we are talking, all of us, of going digital, and somehow each one of us were instrumental in this room to move to the fast pace of digitizing everything. Now, with ban of internet, you are bringing the entire economy to a standstill. And that is where, again, a nuances has to come when you are talking about a supervisory body or a regulatory body as to a very strict justification norms before anybody is endorsing to it. Today, it has become like a shortcut. So that is where, what kind of a role do you think the NASSCOM will be playing? Because you will have to link quite horizontally into these things, because you are a voice for all grievances coming from everywhere. Over to you, Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you, Aruna ji, and I think some very useful and interesting points that were made. But to just start with the point which you just requested me, the IT Act was enacted in 2000. So if you look back, what new technologies have really come in after that act, or what was the technology at that point in time? I would think that internet was the technology at that point in time, and we started from there. After that, I think 2 new technologies have come in which have intersected with regulation. There could be 3, but I'm talking about 2. One is this blockchain technology, and second, now we are seeing artificial intelligence. And the interesting point is, when you don't understand technology, you can ban it. To regulate it, you need to understand it. And we have seen, as Aruna ji mentioned, when we talk about blockchain and crypto, we are still understanding. And then in the new world, it is not about a jurisdiction in terms of physical borders and saying I'm going to regulate and that's going to be sufficient, because the digital world does not recognize boundaries so easily. So therefore, I think at a starting point, to be able to understand the technology and then think of regulation is going to be the key factor for us to be successful. And that's where I will resonate with some of the points which Dr. Roy made and Mr. Gokul made, is that in India today, do we have an institutional capacity or a process which says that, look, we are going to study this, we are going to do impact assessment of what we have done, and we are going to constantly learn and evolve. We are left with a TRAI doing certain things, we are left with a CCAOI doing certain things, and sometimes MeitY also does certain things. And these are good initiatives, but they are ad hoc, and they don't bring in the full might of what, as India, we are capable of doing as analysis and understanding. And that's because the law does not really require it. So I think the law needs to require a due diligence in terms of saying that what are we trying to regulate. And the Parliamentary Standing Committee reports, they were good. They are still good, but I think they're woefully inadequate in the new world of digital technologies. So when you look at the report, when they deal with competition, when they deal with e-commerce, it is difficult to actually rationalize as to the source of the harm and so on and so forth. So I think this is one point. And when you look at the IT Act, I think on balance, as from an industry point of view, it has served us well, but the shelf life is pretty much over. So, and that's the new reality, and that can be contextualized from the point of view of the new technologies. From an industry point of view, you always want full certainty. You will never get it fully. But what do we mean by certainty? I think as industry, what we mean by certainty is that once the law is there, it should not be so open to interpretation that it leads to default non-compliance when somebody comes knocking. Because you interpret it in the right way, but somebody else has a different interpretation. And then to clog our legal system and then go up to the Supreme Court, I think that is a tedious thing that we need to avoid. And I want to make an example of this. We have a cert direction. It requires in Direction 5 to do verifiable KYC. Okay, so Dr. Maheshwari here has given me his KYC. He says this is his residence address.
Only crypto.
Yes, yes. I talk about cloud also in Direction 5.
Finance will need it.
Yes.
Everywhere you
So it actually says that if you're a cloud provider, you need to, for your customers, you need to do a verifiable KYC, right? So I think it is not possible to do it at scale. And another example, for example, it came out with an FAQ. Now, we need to think about primary legislation and its interplay with the delegated legislation, and how do you make sure that when primary law is inadequate, you revisit the primary law rather than stretch the boundaries of a delegated legislation, which actually then leads to a situation where you will have challenges. And from an industry point of view, to be in a default non-compliance is a huge cost, and it's a cost for the country. Another thing which we have seen in the last few years is a natural overlap. So when you think of regulation around cloud, so you see DOT, TRAI, you also see IT Act and MeitY, and then at times you wonder where is the ball actually sitting, and how should it converge in a manner that it is coordinated. Similarly, same thing happens in OTTs, that industry says we are under the IT Act, we are doing our due diligence, and then there are overlaps in terms of other regulators. Similarly, e-commerce, I think the IT Act was a great thing which gave the legal basis for e-commerce, right? But now when you are trying to regulate e-commerce, what is the role of a Digital India Act vis-a-vis, let's say, a e-commerce policy and so on and so forth? These are some of the points of discussion. And in this, another interesting point is, what is the role of MeitY? Because like internet, AI will be all pervasive, blockchain will be all pervasive. So MeitY was never intended to be a super regulator. but it was also not intended in that sense to compete with other regulators or other departments and authorities in terms of jurisdiction and scope. So I think one kind of a role is that where it does the role of coordination very well, where it brings everybody onto the table and gives a whole of government approach at a horizontal level to the law. So, and the last point which I want to focus is that what is it that we can avoid and learn from the past experience? The discussion on data protection bill has taken us 5 years. We may agree or disagree that where we have reached finally is good or bad, and that's not the subject matter of this debate. But the point of the learning is we shouldn't take 5 years in Digital India Act, because the technology is obviously pacing and it will not wait for that kind of a time period. So perhaps one way to think about it is that, one, let's be laser focused on the problems we can clearly identify. Because just like software, if you design a software for some future functionalities, it will be outdated before it is in the market. So in that, one blind spot that I want to highlight is that just like privacy has become a horizontal baseline today, I think digital state, and I'm not talking about digital government, today digital state is a baseline. It is not nice to have a digital services to citizens. It is not nice to provide machine readable data by regulators. It is must have. So unless this is an obligation on the state as part of our ambition to be a $1 trillion digital economy, I think we'll be blindsided and the outcomes will be suboptimal. So I think putting the ball back to the government to say that you have an obligation to treat citizens and users as customers, and therefore do that. The other set is to say, we know that problems on intermediary and platform. Cybersecurity, the one section in the IT Act is today grossly inadequate. You need to have a complete framework to deal with it. And when you're talking about dealing with the unknowns, I think we can't really put in the law everything to deal with it. But what we want is that can we trust the process to deal with it well? And how will the trust come in? The trust will come in by three things. One, we have a strong regulatory governance process. That means I talked about capacity. I think we can improve our consultation processes. We can make the decision more accountable and transparent. I think that's one way of looking about it. Capacity building within the state, I think I can talk about it in every forums and repeatedly. I think that, but the point is made. And lastly, on awareness. So Section 66A is struck down, but if the enforcement agencies are not aware that it is struck down, then it's a problem. So I think the way the law will need to be enforced in a services era and especially in a tech era, it requires huge amount of nuance. So I think there needs to be capacity building and awareness on enforcement side. So I think if we invest in that, then that could be one of the ways to really think about it going forward. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And one thing I'll say, the Digital India Act is attempting is to push the responsibility of KYC, AML, everything to intermediaries. So, which is very good. So they are not directly getting into it. They are saying that, okay, you intermediaries, as an intermediary, as an SRO, ensure these things are cleaned up. And then we will sit as a watchdog to see whether your parameters are right, wrong, whether you are going or doing the right direction or not doing it. So I think that's a good change which is happening. I think I welcome that. The second thing what you mentioned is the too many players going. So this interministerial body chaired by MeitY, I think is a good development where the OTT and everything is coming there. Because you have to understand very clearly that ignorance is a very big issue, and IT, it spreads like anything. If you look at the various use cases, the use cases have come first. Now we are thinking to regulate it. So it's like a reverse engineering we are doing at every place when we are moving ahead with it. So therefore, it is very necessary as to what kind of a role we are looking at and a constant dialogue with the stakeholders. That is very, very important, and not to be a moral policeman all along what you said from the government's point of view. You did talk about this digital thing to being the baseline. which is very important. Very important. It is a non-negotiable kind of a thing, has to emerge very clearly in this Digital India Act. That is it will be there with everybody. You have to provide it to everybody. Now, whatever you can improve upon it, try that. So that is how it will go. And then the last point, what you mentioned about trust, and that is where I'll bring in Dr. Charu Malhotra, because what is important is how do you make people aware, starting from policymakers, of course, the players, the users, what their rights are, like what has been rightly mentioned, that they have a right to privacy, they have a right of expression, they have a right to have an access. So with these rights of the consumer and of grievance redressal, immediate grievance redressal. So with these, then you have intermediaries, then you have SROs, then you have this appellate bodies, the structure what is being envisaged today, not very effective. And then of course the policymakers. And policymakers on technology, the ignorance level is very, very high, because it's a generation issue. You know how things have moved. So few are up to date, few are not. So how do you bring these two together so that, because the governance model has to emerge it. Over to you, Dr. Charu. And her institution, I think IIPA can be the platform for all these issues. You know what we are looking at.
We are trying.
Yes, please.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a pleasure to sit next to you when we have idolized you, and bigger pleasure to be invited with such stalwarts like Dr. Rai and Dr. J. Satnarayan, Vakulji and Ashishji. I won't take much time thanking all of you for being so attentive or for placing me here, but I want you to remember that, like Vakul also said, we are here for citizens, all of us. And citizens would use digital technology only when they trust it. I think he saw my notes and then he used the word, because the only word I've written is trust. Okay, now, when I say trust, how did this word occur to me as a professor was, my father would not let me, book his ticket online till I have not posted him that printout, because he would not trust the soft copy of that. Okay, my house help will not accept a smartphone because she says, log mere piche pad jayenge. Again, trust, because she thought if she would use it, she's open to all, suddenly. So trust can be one, I feel, on three aspects. One is privacy. Who's using my information, who's abusing my information, who's reusing my information, and who's misusing my information. So that's privacy. Second is security, that whatever I'm saying, I'm doing, and wherever it is going, it is protected. It's not going to be intruded into, and suddenly this AIMS ransomware attack is everywhere. So anybody who would have used technology in rural belt or disabled people or senior people are further vary. If an organization as smart as AIMS is not able to protect data of our leaders, political leaders go for their health issues, how is my data so safe? So people would not understand what is cloud security, how is it better than on-prem solution, etc. But they just need to be secure. And that's why Tala are still selling, locks are still selling. Last is a very inherent factor which very few people are bringing in is integrity. Because data is no longer an oil, it is gold. And what is a gold? Gold can be made into ornaments. कभी उसकी चूड़ी बना लो, कभी उसका गले का बना लो, कभी उसके कान का बना लो. ठीक है, same is with data. Data can be tweaked and twisted anytime. So if my base is biased, if my base is wrong, then the decision making, which we keep saying predictive decision making, proactive decision making for governance, like ma'am said, would again all be tarnished because the base was not good. So integrity of data is third thing which I would really want to focus on. So I repeat, for trust, we need to look into not just security, privacy, but also integrity, the biasness of the data, and with, as ma'am said, generative AI, and everybody brought in ChatGPT's formats. And when MeitY itself is saying that we'll have a ChatGPT for farmers, we'll use Bhashni, multilingual, multi-location, amount of data that will go into it, how much of it would be really correct, valid, acceptable? Now I take us to another world, okay? And that world is, like ma'am said, so many players in the picture, okay? And if I as a professor have to integrate, if I have to classify those players, I would make them all C's because I love C for obvious reasons. So first stakeholder is community, citizen, consumer, jo marzi bol lo. Second is corporate, industry, startups, innovation, okay? So all those with profit, deep pockets, deep risk-taking ability. Third is country. Country level pe all policy makers, like ma'am said. Okay, all state. Any Vision 2047, Atmanirbhar Bharat is all done at a state level in a federal structure. Ab community tak kahan tak pahunch raha is what we have to look into. And last but not the least, with new emerging technologies, we have cross-country players. Okay, we have geographies melting into cyberspaces. So with these kind of stakeholders, ma'am, the ambit of capacity building, which I've been looking for last 35 years with your blessings, it has changed its shape. Capacity building is for various reasons, for various stakeholders I brought in. And that now must include public awareness and sensitization processes. I want agile technology adoption. I want agile policy frameworks, like all of us said. I'm not going to repeat it. But do I have acceptance in the same manner as the technology is growing or as the innovation is growing? And public awareness and sensitization is not just hoardings and banners. They also come by cybersecurity by design and privacy by design. Why can't my phone switch off when I am trying to access a wrong site? Wrong in whatever ways policymakers can decide. So cybersecurity by design or privacy by design is an onus on the C called as corporates. Okay, so I want the pressure on policymakers, which is country, to be reduced so that these players can focus on visioning. If my country, I mean, hats off to our political head these days, can think of Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant Bharat, it is the responsibility of corporate players to come up and give us devices and software and firmware and, products which are safe and secure and validated from the point they are conceived and designed. And let me take you to global best practices. Ma'am, China, I'm not emulating China in any other way. China already has an algorithm act, AI act. सारा source code उनके state players के पास जाता है, वो पढ़ते हैं, उसे validate करते हैं, उसको check करते हैं, और उसके बाद product बनता है. दो advantage. They get the source code, they can monitor it, they can check it. I come to the last point of my discussion. Vakul ji and Ashish ji brought in legislation process, how bulky they are, how tedious they are, how many rules, how many amendments, how many acts, how many guidelines. मैं कितने भी रट्टे मार लूँ ना, 2000, 2008 और बीच में क्या क्या आता है, 2011, 2013, 2016, 2019, इन सब में IT Act amend हुआ है with its parallel paraphernalia of guidelines and rules etc. If this is what a 35 साल का experience वाला professor is facing a problem, imagine what my citizens are going through. I'll bring you to another global best practice. When I was reading about these bulky rules and how tough these guidelines and amendments, decentralized or segregated or centralized, Digital India Act, whatever, I read another global best practice called as Rules as Codes, RAC. New Zealand has started making laws and acts which are machine consumable. They are readable by software codes so that the compliance burden on legal enforcement agencies is reduced and compliance is automatic so that the queues decrease. Okay. I would also let you know, rules as codes are very easy to amend, reusable, and I have already presented this idea when I was a senior technical advisor to sectoral group of secretaries for Vision 2047. Governance group particularly, that if we want India to be 2047, a single one nation, one platform, I've learned it from Dr. J. Satnarayan.
I do need to make sure that the corresponding judgment processes are also amenable to modification and are as agile as the technologies that are going. So in single stroke of discussions, I've given you my experience squeezed in takeaways that we need to look into global best practices, but we need to contextualize it to Indian context. 70% of us in rural India. Thank you.
Very well said, and good you listed out where the world is moving. Because I'll just make one sentence here that Dubai has come up with the best act I've seen on virtual digital asset. And the resultant is all my friends in that who are working in that arena have opened an offices there. So I'm not very sure when they will lift that foot from India and disappear from here. So it will be Indians who will be working, but the label will not be India. So we have to be very conscious about it. I'm thankful to the organizers for giving us 15 more minutes. So this we have to use very wisely. So we can take 2 questions from the audience. And after that, I will request my panelists to take 1 minute, and I'll take 1 minute to wrap up, right? So any questions or any clarifications? 1, 2, 3 are there. Okay, we take 3 of you, please. Be as precise as possible.
Yeah, Prashanta Roy. I work in public policy. Mr. Satyanarayana, you started out, on this thing about centralization and not over-centralizing the frameworks. So I'm just wondering, how do you think we could look at, ensuring that the federal structure of the country is protected when you have a lot of very good platforms, but there's very strong centralized in areas which are state subjects, so COVIN, in education, NDR, etc. And there are concerns among the states that they are losing control.
Very quickly, it is a good question in a federal country. I think the balance lies in creating certain core building blocks, which could be central. But all non-core building blocks of the framework should be at the state level. So that's how, in a very precise manner, I would say. It's a mix of both a very limited core centralization, which is useful for the whole country, and the same for the whole country, and all the operational aspects are non-core and they are handled by the state.
You please.
Good morning to the panel. I am Anupam Tiwari. I am from IETE, Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers. Just a common question that I am putting up to the panel. Mr. Ashish had brought out that we today stand about 5 years back. We should have been, this 21st of April 23 should have been about 5 years back. We have taken a 5-year-long journey. The moderator had come up with the point that fake news is there. Then Mr. Vakul had come up with something about a small mention about extortion by voice technology. It was a fake thing call. Now European Union has come up in the month of February, Deepfake Regulations Act. 2 months back. Today we stand with Digital India Act. Now we should not be reactive again. So after about few cases happen across nation, big cases happen, then we start discussing and then we come up with some draft of Deepfake Regulations Act. Today with the Digital India Act, at least we should give some mention inside that we should start working on Deepfake Regulations Act also, because we should not wait for something to happen at national level, then we start discussing, debating, and then come up with some forum, then again another symposium, and then another about 4 or 5 years take this. Thank you.
So anybody want to take this answer? Otherwise, okay, fine, I'll take it. Under the Digital India Act draft, MeitY is in talk with PIB. There'll be the partners who will be steering this fake news kind of a thing. And PTI is also getting involved into it so that there is an immediate detection. And surprisingly, you will be surprised, even Election Commission is getting involved into it at the state levels. So because maximum fake news will start emerging when the elections are in process. So it's a very sensitive thing at this moment of time. But there is a thought process, I'll just say. I think you also raised hand, and then there, you please. We can quickly take it.
I have the same question on fake news, like deep fakes.
There's somebody. Yeah, yes, please, and then I'll come to you. Yes.
Thank you for this discussion. I'm Archit from Center for Communication Governance. We study technology, law, and policy. So my question is directed at all panelists. We've spoken about concentration of power. We've spoken about dynamic policy making and the need for that. So my question is specifically alluding to the point Mr. Satyanarayanan made about the dedicated institution. So I'm wondering if the government is debating about an independent regulator because, and similarly, Mr. Ashish also spoke about how MeitY's role has become of a super regulator. So are we debating or discussing the role of an independent regulator? Because even countries that like Bangladesh that have not copied, to some extent, replicated our IT rules have an independent regulator, a telecommunication regulator. So does Sri Lanka, and so does all Western democracies that have implemented the, say, for example, the DSA or the OSB. So that's my first question. And second question is directed to Mr. Vakul Sharma about the role of intermediaries and their categorization and classification within the new DIA. And I'm happy to hear from all the panelists, but will the new classification should be based on functionalities, the type of functionalities? How do we bifurcate the hosting intermediaries into different classifications?
I think your questions need very, very long answers. So quickly, in a minute, if both of you can address, and lunchtime, then you can get the details from both of them. Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm looking from the point of view of your question of intermediaries. Now, if I'm looking into the definition of intermediary under the IT Act, Section 21W of the IT Act, that is a very limited definition. Now, if I'm looking into a limited definition, that limited definition can be put across and can be created into a various set of versions also. But that limited definition has also said in a clear terms that search engines, web hosting companies, internet gateways, and all such activities will be part of the intermediaries. The only difficulty with us is that we have not so far defined intermediaries in a strict categories like access service providers, internet service providers, or for that matter, payment aggregators. So we are just taking a liberty with our Parent Act. So unless and until we are looking into some kind of legislative categorization, this kind of a liberty and this kind of overreach, I should say, from a point of view of creating social media intermediary, significant social media intermediary, such kind of a paradigm shift will keep on happening. Right?
Very precise if you have a question. Yeah, please.
Hi, Malavika Rajkumar from IT for Change. The question is specifically for Mr. Ashish Agarwal. So we currently in the Digital India Act, we have a lot of aspects already being covered under Web 2, platform accountability. There's going to be more definitions of digital rights. There's a lot of governance aspects already inbuilt. My question specifically is when it comes to Web 3, AI, and assisted technology afterwards, do we need, I guess this is a little problematic, do we need a separate governance regime and governance tools that should exist? Are we going to look 10 years later and think that, okay, because we discussed this in the DIA, now it is inadequate? Because we have a lot of Southeast Asian countries, and China has done its own regime, but we have a lot of South Asian countries in the global South now trying to regulate it independently. Is there any scope for, or is there any merit in having its own separate parent legislation? Because as you mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of ambiguity and over reliance on delegated legislation or clarifications from judicial authorities. So this is my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we as a country have a lot of opportunities. We are a country of entrepreneurs and startups. We should keep that in mind. I don't think we should, without fully understanding the problems, lay out a prescriptive framework. So from that point of view, I think we should focus on activities and conduct when we are regulating harm and focus on enablement, keeping that in mind. Thanks.
fine. So I come back to the panelist for the final wrap-up. I request Mr. J. Satyanarayana to come up with his slides quickly, and then one minute each we will say, and then I'll wrap it up. Please.
Thank you. I think this session is about Kal Aaj Aur Kal, but telling about Kal Aaj Aur Kal in 60 seconds is very difficult, but I will try. So this is the digital journey, because I'm a prisoner of my own experience and memory. I have listed only those projects with which I was associated in the last 30 plus years. So some of them, the projects that I handled were pre-IT Act, like 1997. We did the card project at the time. We had to amend the Registration Act just to make it legally permissible to register documents, sale deeds on the computer, and so on. It went on, as I mentioned, from PC to QC, quantum computing. I've been there, probably too old to be, in the scene any longer. So with that, my key point there is, this is the role of IT Act. One, ek jhalak mai dikhata hu, those who have not seen it. This is as of yesterday. The ETHAL count shows 50 billion transactions already happened in the last 4 months across the whole country. See the growth since the time I was secretary, and later Aruna ji was there, and then how exponentially it's going. So that's one aspect. So whatever we're trying to, see about the act, really it has made a huge difference. Last is a very important, significant slide. I will not spend too much of time, but to expose the idea that, we are going from IT to ET, ET meaning exponential technologies, which is the current thing. So in the World Economic Forum, I have my colleague Arushi here. Can you just raise your hand? Yes. Those who can also network during lunchtime. She's working on this. Is also the shaping the future with exponentials is the theme we are working on in the World Economic Forum, which is the challenges. There are a lot of positive benefits of technologies, these new technologies, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about what is in the red as the negative externalities. The increased threat to cyber security, all our encryption, everything gets trivial, when you have quantum computing. All this can be broken in no time. Robotizing humanity, new threats to privacy through IoT and drones. Conditioning human behavior, the way people, behave in the society, or voting patterns, etc., etc. These are all possible with new technologies. Adverse effects on environment, and also because of the specialized nature, concentration of wealth. We have seen it already happen in the digital era. It can happen with much more visibility in the future. So these problems are really going to, descend on the, scene very soon. But how can we build? We have seen also a combined statement on a chat GPT kind of these things by a group of prominent people recently. So how can the proposal on the table is to build a safe future, that means shaping the future with exponentials as a concept. Can we provide for, instead of just micromanaging or trying to provide for everything there, create protocols which various organizations and countries will honor, like Kyoto Protocol on environment. It has brought us somewhere. So protocol-based approach is one thing in the design and development. Second is SRO, which has been already alluded to by Vakul and Arunaji, and PBR, performance-based regulation. A combination of these would need to be the future probably, and certain basic principles, the core principles are stated. Rest is left for the ecosystem to take care of. So we are working on this concept. We'll be happy to share further thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I request Mr. Gulshan Rai to quickly make his final comments.
So we have discussed what is the enormous issue that we are trying to deal with, or we are discussing these issues there. I think, first of all, whatever the papers of the Digital India Act I have seen there, it's not even a fully concept. considering the enormity and the complexity of the entire subject, we need to have a very clear structure of what the Digital India Act would be there. That is very necessary because the questions which has come up there. How it will be, interoperated with the states, that's the second aspect which had to come up. And I was thinking very loudly sitting over here, if you go back to our constitution there and the initial acts, we have a General Clauses Act. General Clauses Act deal with the general clauses of the entire gambit of the entire legal issues there. If I have to think loudly to and examine that, why don't we look at the Digital India Act as a General Clauses Act? And General Clauses Act is applicable across the federal and states there because they are touching very basic minimum kind of thing, which are a fundamental thing, and it's applicable across. Any state law will have to comply with the General Clauses Act. And wherever any act, if there is a confusion between all this, a duplication or something else, they go back to the General Clauses Act, and the definition, whatever provided General Clauses Act is the final. That's what the interpretation is there. So can we look at the Digital India Act as a General Clauses Act? Thereafter, we leave it to the other ministries, Finance Ministry or the Consumer Ministry or the Commerce Ministry or the Industry Ministry, DOT. Actually, it is all of them in our federal structure. They have their own business allocation rules there. So they are empowered to frame the law as suited to promote their activities there. So we have a General Clauses Act type of things, that model, and then we have each ministries which are there. They may come back with their own enactment, but then there is a interoperability between the different platforms, not only at the center, but at the state level also. That's what I thought. Loudly I think, but it has to be given it, deeper thought and discussed.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. I request Dr. Charu and then Mr. Ashish and then Mr.
Thank you, ma'am. I would have preferred to have last word, but anyway.
Not here.
Not here. Okay, now I'll take your attention to another issue which is very dear to my heart, and G20 is talking about it, and that is green growth. Okay, we are all talking about data, we are all talking about technology, but we know, do we know? Yes, we know. It's an energy guzzler. The obsolescence of devices that is there is already polluting our homes. We have our homes full of outdated chargers, phones. So imagine what our India is having, and add to it the satellite junk. The amount of energy required to train my data sets for AI is not a joke. Okay, do I use proof of work or do I use proof of stake as blockchain? Ashish will be the best judge. But yes, energy, environment, sustainability are issues that should be very dear to our heart. Last but not the least, I personally feel that a lot of carbon emission. Should we simplify our ways? How would technology stand by us? I think it's time for startups to start researching on those areas. Thank you.
Please.
So I just want to underline one point which has been discussed and it needs to be overemphasized, is that given the scale of our population, the size of our population and the demographics, given that children are increasingly, after at least from a COVID world, so used to using digital services, I think online complaint handling, as was mentioned earlier, and a credible and a high capacity adjudication process will be really the differentiator between a law and its success. So I think we need to invest in it. We need to make it accessible to all citizens, and we need to demonstrate its success. And I think that is one thing which I want to just leave the thought with that from this law point of view. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. If you ask me, then I can put across to you that it is going to be a complex exercise. It is not going to be an easy exercise as such. It is going to be complex from the word go. What we have to look into is, it is going to be a compendium of laws. inter and intra-departmental and ministries, and including the states, they have to be on board for such kind of an exercise. This exercise cannot be done in a silo. And what I'm looking into is that this act will redefine the federal structure of governance in India. So this is going to be a kind of a major, and if I use a word, tectonic shift in the legislative process, then yes, it is going to be. So we are going to look into a kind of a legislative balance, judicial balance, and an executive balance when we are looking into this kind of a incorporation of this legislation. And let us see. And yes,
Right. Thank you so much. Mr. Gulshan Rai, Dr. Charu, and Mr. Ashish Agarwal, and all the organizers and audience. The takeaways which has emerged very, very strongly from this first session for the Digital India Act, that the scope and the structure of Digital India Act has to be like an umbrella. It cannot be perspective. It is laying down broad rules. It cannot be a micromanaged. And definitely it has to be like what rightly said, like a general clause. You cannot go against it anywhere, because that is the only structure it should aim for. That is the only structure it should go for. And then what the various use cases acts which you are having to address to the nuances has to take care absolutely and clearly about the grievance redressal mechanisms, which has to be prompt and quick when you're moving ahead, which becomes a part of this umbrella structure as a mandate, right? And that is the only path they have to walk upon if we want a success of this. Another thing I would like to say is that then every act which is coming on the use cases by the business rules line department has to be completely in sync. And once it is in sync, then the issue comes of the credibility. Because the problem we are facing in the tech world, which we did not discuss because we are focusing on the act, is the unpredictable behavior, the somersaults which are having, or contradictions which are having. One example I'll give you on the startups, when income tax, we never talk of income tax when we are talking of IT. Income tax gave them a notice on the angel fund they received. That was the end of startups. They were scared. These young tech kids, they didn't understand what has hit them. And then it had to be withdrawn. Like this, many withdrawals you have seen in e-commerce, many withdrawals you have seen in the draft policies. And this is happening because we have to talk of a credibility when we are moving ahead into this. Then it is equally necessary that we have to have a tiered system, have faith in it. The use cases, stakeholders, they have to have a mandatory grievance with a strong SRO. Repetitively, I will say a very strong SRO with a clear mandate of KYC, AML, and whatever concerns are of the various regulators who are spread all over to address that, to develop a mechanism. Then a grievance redressal, only then the top government watchdog comes. They should not get into these nuances, and I think that is a structure which has to emerge. So having said that, we had detailed discussions. I thank again each of the panelists for bringing out in such clarity, in such a brief time, of the concerns, especially because that has to be taken care of when we are drafting Digital Act. I'm very sure the rounds of discussions which the government plans, and to top it all, it should not disturb the federal structure. The understanding vertically, horizontally has to be very, very clear. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Just a moment. May I request you to hand off a small memento to the other panelists? And we would like to have a group photograph of Aruna. Would you hand over the gifts? Yes, please. Yes, sir. Yes, That's okay. We did have some pain. Ma'am, if you could come for the group picture. Ma'am? Huh? Ma'am? This is for you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, thank you.
Push it forward.
All this. Otherwise, all other course is already there.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Wait one more. Wait, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.